So anyways, it says writing absolute value functions from a graph. So we can figure out, and we did a similar question like this on your test. By the way, I'm grading your test. I should have those done today and put the grades in the grade book. We did a similar thing like this with graphing a quadratic function on your test. Basically, there's information, specifically the vertex. We know the H and K can be plugged into a formula. So once we figure out the H and K, we have to determine if there's an A or a B. And we know if there are points on the graph that we can define, those points will help us solve for either A or B. So let's read this real quick and then we'll jump into the next example. It says if the absolute value of the function is written in the form g of x is equal to a times the quantity, the absolute value of 1 over b times the quantity x minus h plus k has a value other than 1 for both a and b, you can rewrite the function so that at least one of a or b is 1. That's going to be kind of they're basically pushing the a into the absolute value function. So what they're doing is they're taking this a and they're multiplying it into the function. And then once it's inside the function, they're pulling it out of the function. Okay.
What do we write down for this question?
That's a good question. You're going to write this down. Write this little formula down in your notes. Okay. You don't have to write down all the words, just that. If A is negative and B is positive, then obviously something has to be negative, but they both can't be negative. So you could just choose one or the other, right? One could be negative. In other words, the negative sign. And let me read this verbatim. So it says when A is negative and B is positive, you can move the opposite of A inside the absolute value expression. This leaves negative 1, the absolute value symbol, and you can push the positive in. In other words, you're never going to push a negative value into the absolute value bracket. Okay, and there's a lot of explaining as to why you wouldn't, but you never push the... So if you have like a negative 2 in the front, like up here, we said, well, if A and B are positive, just push the A in. You could write it this way, or you could pull it back out and leave it this way. But because it's an absolute value bracket, see how I've got this negative 2? I could push the 2 in, but I have to leave the negative out. I can't push that negative value into the absolute value bracket is basically what they're saying. And they said when B is negative, you can rewrite the expression without a negative sign because of the absolute value properties. So what they're saying, if A is negative, you can't push the negative sign in. But if it's negative on the inside, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you're going to push it out. So the things that you want to write down, I'm going to highlight these for you. The first box, obviously. The second box, you'll need to write that down. Let me make it so you can see it, though. And then this box right here. Those are the things that you want to write down. Now, there's probably be a homework problem or two. Probably one that you have to do this with. But in all honesty, you could just plug it into your graphing calculator and do the math that you need to do. So Algebra 2 is a precursor to harder math problems and harder math classes. And so these properties of manipulating the equations is something that you would use in, say, like a calculus class, probably even in a pre-calculus class, but mostly in a calculus class. So we want to introduce you to these properties, but will you use it? Probably not. So Mr. Adams is going to teach it to you. I'm going to give you one example problem. And then if you become an engineer or a math major or something along those lines, they'll go over this again and again and again. Okay? So don't stress if you don't quite understand all this stuff. All right. I got to move on to one we're going to try. So we're going to use this for our next example. You didn't have it all written down? Okay, write faster. You don't have to write all the words, just the equations, okay? And somewhere, this should be written down too. This is what we're going to do for this whole homework thing. What I recommend, and this is very helpful, and it'll help you prepare for the test. Is your next test going to be open book, open note? Yes. But you should probably know these formulas and then look them up if you need to know them. I would, as I do my homework, every homework problem I do, I would write this one out, the one up front. I would write that out every time. The one in red, every time I did a homework problem from the homework, I'd write that out. And then I'd write out what's A, what's B, what's H, what's K. It's very helpful. All right, next one. Oh, man, this looks like a lot. All right. So given that the graph of the absolute function, write the function in the form of g of x is equal to a times the quantity of the absolute value of 1 over b times the quantity of a minus h plus k. Let a equal 1. And it says the vertex is 2, 5. That means that h is 2, k is 5. The value of a is given. So basically, we got to figure out what b is. Also, choose a point on gx like 6, 6 to substitute the values in for g of x. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in, and if you don't see the connections, I'm going to write them over here. We know that a is 1. We don't know what b is. We know that we're going to use the x value of 6 and a y value of 6. We know that h is equal to 2 and that k is equal to 5. So this is my y, this is my x, this is my, let's write that down. This is y, this is x, this is h, and this is k. So we're plugging them all in. What do we have left? And we plugged the 1 in here. There's a implied 1. What's 1 times of all this stuff? Just the stuff. So the a that was here, because we said a was 1, we don't really need to write down the 1. That's like saying 1x, or you could just say x. Well, we don't know what b is, so we got to solve for b algebraically. So here's the tough part. What's 6 minus 2? 4. Okay. Well, we want to get all this stuff by itself. So I'm going to subtract 5 from this side, and I'm going to subtract 5 from this side. And that leaves me with 0 plus 4 over b if I multiply the 4 times the 1. And then 6 minus 5 is 1. So when I go to do the absolute value bracket, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 1 is equal to 4 over b, or 1 is equal to negative 4 over b. And when I solve both those equations, I get b could either be 4 or b could be negative 4. Okay. And then based on the problem's condition where b equals 4, and so what does that mean? So this is the thing that we need to think about. It's saying that it's either one or the other. They're saying it's 4. So what they're saying is if I plug in negative 4 and I do, let's talk about b for a second. There's a couple ways you could determine whether it's positive or negative 4, right? Well, I don't want to over-explain it. Just accept it for now. And when we do more homework problems, yeah, I don't want to lose you. So if it's positive 4, then what we do is we substitute that in, and we have our new equation, g of x is equal to 1 over 4 times the quantity x minus 2. We take the whole absolute value of that plus 5. So then they say, and this is a separate question, let b equal 1. So the vertex of g of x is at So let me explain something. This is like a part B. The vertex of g of x, we're doing a second problem now. I put it all in one because that's how it is in your book. What's our vertex? Look at the graph. Yep, it occurs at 1, 6. So what does that tell us? H is 1. What is K? 6, and we're given B. So now let's plug that in. Substitute the values in. H goes here, right? Because it's, right, remember this is f of x is equal to a, absolute value 1 over b, x minus h, comma, or plus k, right? So h goes in here, which is 1, and then 6 goes out here. Now choose point on g of x with the integer coordinates. So what they're saying is look at the graph. When x equals 0, what does y equal? 3, right? So this is my x and this is my y value, right? So I need all those values like I did before. So then this is still 1 plus 6. But now remember that y is the same of g of x. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x. And this is my y value, which is now 3. All right. So let me write it a little bit differently. H equals 1. K equals 6. We said B equals 1. We picked this point here, x comma. This is like x comma y. So we're going to let x in this particular scenario equal 1 and y equal 3. But remember, that's the same as saying g of x equals 3. So then I'm going to do some math. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. I still have the 3 here. I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. This becomes negative 3. Wait. I'm going to subtract. Yeah, I got to subtract 6 from both sides. So then I'm going to end up on this next line. I'm going to write this down. Negative 3 is equal to a times the absolute value of negative 1. What's the absolute value of negative 1? Just 1. So a equals negative 3. Correct? So now I just got to rewrite the equation. So to rewrite the equation, remember it's got to be a absolute value 1 over b x minus h plus k. So a is negative 3, so I put negative 3 absolute value. And because b is 1, I'm just multiplying everything by 1. So I would say x minus h, but h is 1, absolute value plus k, which is 6. And my absolute values look like 1, so just make them a little thicker by thickening them up like this. Okay? What do you guys think of that? Does that make sense? Well, it might not make sense. What's a better way to word that? How do you guys feel? Did you write everything down? Yeah. That's a good way to say it.